Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Madam President, first woman President pro tem of the United States Senate. Earlier this morning, we lost a giant in the Senate. Senator Dianne Feinstein was one of the most amazing people who ever graced the Senate, who ever graced the country. She had so many amazing, wonderful qualities wrapped up in one incredible human being. She was smart. She was strong. She was brave. She was compassionate. But maybe the trait that stood out most of all was her amazing integrity. Her integrity was a diamond. Her integrity shone like a beacon across the Senate and across the country for all to see and hopefully emulate. Dianne Feinstein would typically say, when you asked her how was she voting on something, "Let me study this issue before taking a position. Let me go home and read on it." And when she came back, if she believed the cause or the vote was right and vital to many issues she cared about, she not only voted for it, there was no stopping her in getting it done. She would take on any force, any special interest, any opponent with relentless integrity, and would wear those opponents down until she succeeded. Again, her integrity just shone through them, and she won, and she won, and she won, and each time made the country a better place. I saw this up close when she passed the assault weapons ban, a passion of hers after what happened to her in California. The NRA was a relentless, often mean-spirited and chauvinistic foe. They oozed vitriol against her. But they didn't scare her, they didn't stop her, and they failed against her. Like most of her opponents, they failed against her. Her perseverance, her strength, and most of all, her integrity shone through. I was privileged to carry the bill in the House after she had passed it in the Senate. She guided me every step of the way, and her strength and her integrity strengthened all of us who were fighting that uphill fight. And as we went through that bill, it became clear to me, Dianne Feinstein is not like the others. She's in a class of her own. Of course, it wasn't just the assault weapons ban she fought for. Her accomplishments also included championing the Violence Against Women Act, protecting oversight authority during the investigation into U.S. torture, fighting for climate justice, fighting for marriage equality, fighting for reproductive justice. The list goes on and on. As chair of the Intelligence Committee, Dianne fought for what was right, even if it was hard and difficult and took months and years to dig in and find out what actually went wrong. She never stopped. She took on the CIA and asserted Congress's oversight authority during the investigation into United States use of torture. And through all of her accomplishments, this one and all the others, she always displayed the quintessential grace and strength. None of these sons of guns against her ever rattled her. I remember a few years back when a particularly nasty senator tried to put Senator Feinstein down in a condescending, many would say chauvinistic way. She reacted not defensively, but with strength and poise and integrity. And within 3 minutes, she put this colleague in her place, in his place. And by the end of it, everyone in the room on both sides of the aisle was smiling. That was Dianne to a T. Powerful, prepared, unflappable. She had to be. Whenever she did something, she was often the first to do it. She was elected as the first woman president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, the first woman to serve as mayor of San Francisco, the first woman to serve as U.S. Senator for California, the first woman to chair both the Senate Rules and Intelligence Committees, the first woman member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Our nation will be forever thankful to Senator Feinstein for the accomplishments she fought for. I, too, am personally indebted to Dianne, not just as a colleague, which of course I am in so many ways as a colleague, but as a friend and as a father of 2 daughters. Dianne's work extended far beyond the United States Senate floor, as she gave a voice, a platform, and a leader to women throughout the country for decades. Dianne didn't just push down doors that were closed for women. She held them open for generations of women after her to follow her. She gave a voice, a platform, a model for women across the country who aspire to roles in leadership, in public service, who want to leave their own mark on the world, who want to make this country a better place for others. Today, there are 25 women serving in this chamber, and every one of them would admit they stand on Dianne's shoulders. So Dianne's impact extended far beyond the Senate floor and far beyond politics itself. So today, we grieve. We look at that desk, and we know what we have lost. But we also give thanks. Thanks to someone so rarefied, so brave, so graceful a presence served in this chamber, that someone like that served in this chamber for so many years. In closing, let me just say this. The sign of a leader is someone who dedicates the whole of their spirit for a cause greater than themselves. The sign of a hero is someone who fights for others, who endures for others, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. And the sign of a friend is someone who stands by your side to fight the good fight on the good days and on the bad. Dianne Feinstein was all of this and more. A friend, a hero for so many, a leader who changed the nation, a leader who changed the nature of the Senate and who changed the fabric of the nation, America, for the better. As the nation mourns this tremendous loss, we're comforted in knowing how many mountains Dianne moved, how many lives she impacted, how many glass ceilings she shattered along the way. America is a better place because of Senator Dianne Feinstein. Today, I join with my colleagues in mourning our beloved friend and colleague. Yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Republican leader.
You know how we all refer to each other as my friend from whatever state it is. Honestly, frequently that's not true. But Elaine and I were actual friends of Dick and Dianne. Elaine served on a corporate board with Dick for a number of years. When they were in town together, we would frequently have dinner together. Elaine and I got married shortly after the '92 election. And I remember that Dianne gave us a small depiction of the Capitol. I looked at it this morning because it's still on the wall and remembered our dear colleague as a truly remarkable individual. As the majority leader has pointed out, she was an incredibly effective person at every line, at every level, and she was at all of those levels on the way to the Senate. Those of us who were fortunate to call Dianne our colleague can say we served alongside the longest-serving female senator in American history. Dianne was a trailblazer in her beloved home state of California, and our entire nation are better for her dogged advocacy and diligent service. Over the past 3 decades, the senior senator from California was also the steady hand leading sensitive and consequential work as head of the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary Committee. Her name became synonymous with advocacy for women and with issues from water infrastructure to counter drug efforts. Of course, the first woman to lead her hometown's Board of Supervisors and then govern as mayor was making history and making a difference long before she came to the Senate. And as much as this institution and the American people will remember Dianne's devoted public service, as I indicated earlier, Elaine and I will also remember and cherish a friendship of 30 years we were fortunate to share with Dianne and Dick. So today I know the entire Senate family is gathering around Senator Feinstein's loyal staff. Our thoughts and prayers are with Dianne's daughter, Catherine, her granddaughter, Eileen, the entire Feinstein family, and with all who mourn our dear colleague and friend.
Moments ago, the flags over the Capitol were lowered in memory of Senator Dianne Feinstein. As California's longest-serving senator, Senator Feinstein broke barriers and blazed a trail for women. Her career was, by any standards, historic. Speaking personally, I worked with the senator for quite some time, together on many different bills, but the one that I think stands out was our water legislation. It was historic. It was the first time in California history in more than 25 years that we were able to pass water. It was the WIN Act. And I remember the hours and the nights that we would have to work to try to work through and the challenges. We come from different parties, we have different philosophies, but we put our state first. At the same time, Barbara Boxer opposed it. It was one of the last votes of the Senate. It had more than 70 votes at the time. And I believe at the end of the day, the trailblazing of the first woman elected mayor, even coming from a different party, inspired women from both sides of the aisle to seek elected office and to have their voices heard. My deepest condolences to her family, her colleagues, and to her staff.
Connecticut Democratic Senator Chris Murphy joins us now. Senator, talk to us about your experience working with Senator Feinstein. In particular, a lot of people are talking today about her efforts at gun control, an issue that is very central, I know, to your legislative passions.
So I won election to the Senate in November of 2012. A month later, the tragedy at Sandy Hook happened. So I showed up as a freshman senator knowing that my mission was to try to change America's gun laws to make sure that something like Sandy Hook never happened again. And of course, the first door that I knocked on in that effort was Dianne Feinstein's door, because for the 15 to 20 years leading up to Sandy Hook, Dianne Feinstein had really been a very lonely voice fighting the fight on behalf of tightening our nation's gun laws. Of course, I think you've probably talked about the fact that she, a year after getting to the Senate, passed an assault weapons ban. She reached out across the aisle and got Republicans to support it as well. But after it expired in 2004, nobody was really talking about the issue of gun violence. In fact, a lot of Democrats were told by their consultants that they would lose votes if they talked about guns. Dianne didn't listen. She knew that this was an issue of moral conscience, and she never stopped fighting on this issue of keeping our kids safe. And today, we have a very robust anti-gun violence movement. We finally, last year, passed the first bill since the assault weapons ban of any significance on guns. And all of that happened only because of Dianne Feinstein, because of what she did in 1994, but really what she did after that. When nobody else would talk about guns, Dianne would. And she kept the movement alive for about 15 to 20 years. And for that, families all across the country are eternally grateful.
We keep talking about her legacy, and I wonder, looking at her immense career, what do you think her biggest accomplishment was?
Well, I mean, I think it is hard to beat that assault weapons ban because it showed what was possible. For the next 10 years, we had a dramatic decline in the number of mass shootings in America. They went right back up after the bill expired. And her work to build the movement, I think, has allowed us to have these successes today. I think, to me, a close second is her work to hold the intelligence community accountable when she released that report that made clear the United States had been engaged in torture in some of our military operations overseas. I think that was a really defining moment for the country and for the world to show that we were willing to be self-critical when we hadn't lived up to our values. That was a really tough moment for Dianne, but her willingness to speak truth to power, I think it breathed a lot of courage into other members of the Senate and the political class. That's a big part of her legacy as well.
Senator Murphy, I'm thinking about your example that, and so many others have repeated it, that she continued to fight to try and address gun violence at times when it wasn't popular, at times when there were legislative roadblocks up in her path, even from members of your own party. I'm wondering what she told you about how to address those frustrations in Congress.
So she was convinced that the conventional wisdom was wrong. So after 1994, when the assault weapons ban passes, the word goes out to Democrats that this is a politically polarizing issue, that you're on the wrong side of the American public if you work on the issue of guns. Dianne never believed that that was right. That's why she kept talking about it. And she kept on winning elections in California, even back when California used to elect more Republicans. And so what she told me when I got to Congress was, the NRA is not as powerful as people think they are. This issue is more powerful and more popular than the pundits will tell you. Have faith that if you keep working this issue, eventually the rest of our colleagues will come around to the reality, which is that there's a big wellspring of support if you take on the gun lobby. And if she hadn't been there to tell me that when I first got there, if she hadn't been there to tell others like me who wanted to work on this issue when they came to Congress, we wouldn't have been able to build this movement that today is pretty powerful. It was Dianne Feinstein's belief that the politics were wrong on this issue and that she was right that allowed a lot of other people to end up following in her footsteps.
Senator, I know that other people have mentioned as well this moral authority that she brought in speaking on that issue in particular, given her own experience and how she first came to be in the national spotlight. I wonder if you could talk about that a bit more and the effect that that had in those kind of early debates when you talk about the assault weapons ban. Do conditions like that, could you foresee that happening again at this moment?
Well, I mean, let me just speak a little bit about Dianne's quiet strength. I mean, it seems like an odd word to apply to her because she wasn't quiet. She spoke out on lots of things that were important to her. But inside the Democratic caucus, we have private meetings twice a week. A lot of big issues get settled there. Dianne didn't speak at every meeting. And so when she spoke, people listened to her. I remember at one point we were talking about Saudi Arabia's involvement in the Yemen war and the killing of Khashoggi, and she had a relationship with the Saudis. She knew them, and so when she stood up and broke with them, were very strongly critical of them. People listened. If Dianne Feinstein was willing to take a stand, well, then you wanted to be with her. So I think when she spoke up, she was just one of a handful of senators that everybody listened to. And as to the second half of your question, yes, absolutely. We are going to ban assault weapons in this country. That will happen eventually because Dianne was right. The American public are on our side. 65% of Americans want a ban on assault weapons like the one that Dianne Feinstein passed years ago. And that movement she helped to build and keep alive, it is ultimately going to prevail, and that will be part of her legacy as well.
Senator Murphy, with you and a few others now holding the baton that she carried for so long, what measures are you hoping to pass on gun violence now?
Well, listen, I will take whatever we can get, but right now we're really thinking about universal background checks and reimposing that ban on assault weapons, or at least trying to get the age up to 21 to stop young people from buying assault weapons. But the good news is last year's bill, the 2022 Safer Communities Act, which included 5 big changes in gun laws, the whole thing was opposed by the NRA. Dianne played a big role in getting it passed. That bill is already having an impact. Violence rates across the country since we passed that bill are coming down. They've been going up over a 3-year period of time, but in the last 6 months, murder rates in American cities have been dropping. So we still need to pass new laws, but we actually should take a moment to stop and celebrate the fact that last year's law that Dianne helped pass is having an impact.
All right, Senator Chris Murphy. Senator, thank you very much for sharing your reflections with us.
Let's talk about what the President of the United States has said about Dianne Feinstein and her legacy.
Well, he put out a statement a short time ago, Vlad, about his former Senate colleague. And I think what stood out from that statement about a woman that he worked so closely with, particularly on the assault weapons ban in the mid-90s, but so many other issues as well. He said, I knew what she was made of and I wanted her on our team. He was talking about why he recruited her to serve on the Judiciary Committee when he was the chair of the Judiciary Committee. And notable that after she was recruited onto that team, it was just a couple of years after she became a senator that she was authoring and pushing through this major piece of legislation, the assault weapons ban. And it really, established her as a formidable legislator and a leader, and she would go on to lead on so many other issues, from fuel efficiency to gay marriage to cybersecurity to interrogation practices.